All right. Hi, Emily. How's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
Good, good. I love it when you start these with a Larry David reference. It always sort of, it lights my soul. Uh, all right. Well, so today we're coming back again to talk about some of the findings from the Manufacturing Pressure and Productivity Index. And today we're talking about onshoring jobs. Exciting
Hmm.
stuff.
Yeah, onshoring is kind of the new wave. For a long time, the tide was heading out to cheaper pastures. Places like India, China, Vietnam absorbed a whole lot of American manufacturing jobs since the 1980s. But now it's really coming in the other direction, and a lot of manufacturing jobs are coming back to American shores.
Yeah, this conversation always has the potential to put on display how I was raised by at least one socialist in my household. I think we're gonna find me shaking my fist at folks who decide to or the bourgeoisie who decides to offshore manufacturing in order to increase productivity. But I'll try to keep that railed in for the sake of this discussion. But you're absolutely right. That has been the prevailing trend for American manufacturers for genuinely the last 40 years. Maybe it's really picked up steam post NAFTA. So we're talking about the 90s into the early aughts. But now there's increasing pressure to go in the opposite direction and bring back much of this work to the United States, and of course all the associated jobs that go with that. So where is this newfound pressure coming from?
Oh, there's quite a lot of factors that are contributing to it. You could say it's both a carrot and a stick situation, where the carrot is a lot of government stimulus to restart American markets, to kind of bring this pillar of the American economy back to America itself. We live in an economy right now that's dominated by service jobs. And with the gig economy then disrupting those even further, we're getting into a position where the middle class is shrinking very rapidly, and there needs to be an injection of solidly middle class jobs that can support families. And traditionally, manufacturing has made up a huge component of that type of job. So American governments going back to the Obama administration have been launching various programs that give various stimuluses and tax reductions and other leverage to encourage American manufacturers to hire American.
So it's a point really well taken, right? That manufacturing is critical. It's a bedrock of the American economy. I think that the same is true for most of the major industrial economies around the world. Certainly, our largest competitor in this respect, China, manufacturing is at the center of their success and their vision for their society moving forward. So it is critically important that American manufacturing be able to not just sustain itself but thrive and play a role in the thriving also of the individual American, which is the
Mhm.
point that you're making, right? It's why manufacturing is so crucial to the survival of the middle class because it's sustainable and really central to our national security and our national interest. Um, in light of that, I've always personally found it surprising that there hasn't been more pressure, genuinely, to reshore more of the work of manufacturing, if only to protect sectors that are critical to the American economy. But there's no surprise, right, that we, being in an election year, are now having a more heated debate about the role of manufacturing in the US. And no surprise that then in our findings, nearly half, a little more than half, I
A
think
little more than
51%, yeah, of our respondents pointed to political pressure to onshore work as something that they were anticipating having to navigate. So there's an interesting tension that I think that creates today, given some of the things that we know about manufacturing operating in the U.S., like it exists at a massive skilled labor deficit. Will you talk to us a little bit about how this pressure to onshore work, and thus creating more work opportunities or more jobs for American labor, how that is colliding with the already existing lack of skilled labor in the industry?
Yeah, and if you've been watching these videos, we've mentioned the manufacturing job shortage in probably all of them. It's a concern that's going to be popping up and mitigating and exacerbating any other opportunity or challenge that these manufacturers are facing. The current studies are indicating that probably 2.1 million manufacturing jobs could go unfilled by 2030. Which shockingly is a year that is coming up soon. So when you're saying that, yeah, we're going to move production back to America, we're going to open American factories and staff them with American workers, you are kind of confronting this challenge head on. And the solution isn't to pay people less. Even though offshoring was largely pursued to chase down cheaper labor, you're not going to be able to find that cheaper labor in the States. Already, if there's a job shortage, you're certainly not going to get more applicants by offering less money. Instead, you should focus on up-leveling the talent that you do have, equipping new engineers, new factory workers, new procurement officers with the knowledge they need to replicate the functionality of a 20-year veteran. It's all about doing more with less, about getting the most out of the few people that you may have, and using that as a way to mitigate the fact that, yes, you will have to pay these people more than you were paying people in other countries. So I think that's, a major challenge that onshoring is going to bring to any manufacturer. But I think it goes hand in hand with an opportunity to embrace that up-leveling and to really kind of build a new generation of American manufacturers.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I love the framing of embracing the upside of reigniting labor productivity in the U.S. by upskilling the American labor force and closing the skilled labor gap. But the truth is, there is another much more pressing event taking place that is putting pressure on folks to reshore more of their work now, which is the dock workers strike taking place.
Mm-hmm.
That today is preventing manufacturers who are even trying to nearshore the production of component parts. It's forcing them to turn to suppliers here in the U.S. And unfortunately, a lot of folks aren't prepared to do that because they don't have great visibility to what options exist for them. And the truth is, part of that is a data problem. And part of it is these many decades of offshoring work have led to a lack of resilience in the American supply chain. Right? There simply are fewer options in terms of American suppliers, because they have had to struggle to survive in an environment where they're competing with low-cost competitors in Mexico or Southeast Asia or China. So it's a really interesting evolving situation right now that that many, I think, are waking up to. Many major manufacturers are waking up to today and sort of having to answer the question, like, what the hell are we going to do if we can't get any of our component parts or any of our product through customs? How are we going to keep our assembly lines rolling? And I anticipate that what we're going to hear over the next week or so are increasingly louder voices echoing concerns over this dock worker strike, creating or deepening the economic recession that many have anticipated to be on the horizon. So that's an interesting one. Let's batten down the hatches on that.
Absolutely. I think we probably will end up looking at the period between the 1980s and the mid-2010s perhaps as a golden era in supply chain opportunity. It used to be kind of, I don't want to say trivial, but it was assumed that if you needed a part from Vietnam and you needed another part shipped in from China and you needed a third part that's made by a specialist manufacturer in Germany, that was just sort of a reasonable cost to doing business. But we've just seen kind of a chaotic events and disruption year after year after year at this point now in the global supply chain. And I think you're right. It's a batten down the hatches situation. What can you do locally? What can you do that's guaranteed? How can you shore up your supply chain so that it doesn't have all these externalities putting it at risk?
Yeah, I mean, really, when you talk about that time being sort of a golden era for the supply chain, I would say certainly so for maybe supply chain efficiency. For so long, the order of the day for many manufacturers has been just-in-time inventory, a concept made popular by consulting firms like McKinsey, which absolutely has created cost efficiencies for manufacturers. But as we saw during COVID, also creates a brittleness in the supply chain that is incredibly difficult for societies to navigate when things really go off the rails. So here we look at, COVID as an event, a black swan event that many of our supply chains are just recovering from. And we can look out on the horizon and we can see increasing geopolitical conflict, whether it be in the Middle East or between the US and China, also potentially brewing on the horizon, which makes it, again, an issue of national security to onshore more and more of this work. That brings me to an interesting conversation that maybe now is several weeks too late to participate in a meaningful way, but the acquisition of U.S. Steel by Nippon, right? A Japanese company, has both made its way into the political conversation surrounding the election, but also is part of a more serious discussion of whether or not critical parts of our manufacturing infrastructure can be offshored, even to someone who is as close a friend and ally to the U.S. as Japan. So I wonder what your reaction is to that. We haven't yet talked much about supply chain resilience directly, but how do you think about that as maybe one of the motivating factors for onshoring work?
Yeah, I think what this contributes to, along with anything else, is a sense of uncertainty. So, the Nippon acquisition of US Steel, I don't think either of us are expert enough to speculate as to exactly how that will go, what sort of challenges it'll introduce, what sort of opportunities. Will the cost savings compensate for the additional supply chain challenges? We don't know. And I think that sort of uncertainty in and of itself should be the motivator. Let yourself not be motivated to find the answers to all these questions, but to be prepared for whatever the answer might be. And I think onshoring is one component of just sort of removing variables from the equation, removing factors that could be major detriments to you. And I think what it also allows for is a greater agility in adapting to situations. So as I mentioned before, onshoring is all about getting more from fewer employees. It's all about up-leveling skills and talent. And a major way you can do that is through technological adaptation. Picking up new tools and up-leveling your systems and taking advantage of all the, frankly, miraculous advances that we've made in various areas of manufacturing and manufacturing data is probably the best way you can kind of hedge your bets and be able to be agile enough to respond to however the situation plays out. Like if you wake up tomorrow and you realize, hey, our number one supplier for part X no longer is capable of trading with the United States, all of the ships are getting turned back at the port, you need to be able to find a plan B like yesterday. And technology is the best way to enable these sorts of rapid pivots.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Now, obviously, technology can only play a partial role in solving problems for manufacturers like the skilled labor crisis, which is going to make it hard to adequately deliver on a big influx of demand. But that said, pressure to onshore more work is going to create an influx of demand for American smaller manufacturers, fabricators, job shops, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers, which is a great thing for American manufacturers. Now they're going to have to answer the question, how do we capture as much of that influx as possible, and how do we then deliver on the work? And technology, as I said, is going to play a role in both helping them move faster and upskill folks. That said, the flip side of the coin is this onshoring of work has the potential to increase costs for OEMs or larger major manufacturers. So they have to think very seriously about where they can find other ways to control costs. So I imagine this is where procurement departments are going to come into the spotlight for a lot of these major manufacturers, and a lot of pressure is going to be applied on those folks to find ways to consolidate suppliers here in the U.S. or find onshore replacements for suppliers who maybe were in Mexico or in South and Central America, but also find those who can help with consolidation or just leverage data to negotiate more effectively with the suppliers you're now having to engage. So I really expect like a period of immense tension between major manufacturers and their downstream suppliers as more work is shifted into the U.S. Tension that maybe is mirrored by the management labor debate taking place right now in the dock workers strike.
I completely agree with that. I think your cost analysis here is completely on point too. When we're looking at potentially recessionary times and we're looking at adopting kind of a guaranteed cost of having to pay all of your labor more due to onshoring, that's not an opportunity to fight those costs directly in a lot of cases. Like I said, you can't just hope to pay people less. But instead, it's an opportunity to try to find other costs that you've been leaving on the table. It's kind of like your home budget. If you suddenly have another kid, you can't go, well, I'm just going to feed all of my kids less. You think, well, maybe we can cut back on, I don't know, my shopping for, why can't I think of a consumer product? Maybe we don't need a new TV this year. You think about other avenues of saving that can cover that cost. And I think in the manufacturing world, there's a lot of costs being left on the table right now. There's a lot of potential savings in consolidating suppliers and speeding up procurement.
By the way, I love this metaphor that you've constructed of the home and the home budget. I'm going to extend this a little bit further to bring into the conversation what many manufacturers, I think, are anticipating potentially turning to help control costs while dealing with an influx of demand, and that's automation. And so automation can take many forms. I would argue a lot of what we do with CADDi is about low-level automation or cognitive analytics, right? We're going to automate the process of identifying whether or not you've made this part before. Now we're doing that in service of taking off the shoulders of the people who are doing more important work this onus of low-level repetitive tasks that don't add value, right? So on the other hand, many manufacturers are probably thinking, how can we get more automation into our plants in the form of robotics assisted with artificial intelligence? And while that's very attractive, I think it's slow going and not necessarily hyper realistic as a reaction to current trends or realities on the ground. So to use the in the home metaphor, I have a lovely wife and partner who helps maintain our life with me here. And this metaphor of adopting robotics as a solution would be like me being unhappy with the amount of money she contributes to our household. So I'm going to go find an entirely new wife in order to sort of up level our household income.
Of course not.
And it's slow going, high potential for failure, right? Or
major investment
major investment, lots of risks,
completely backfire.
likely to backfire. Given you've met my wife and I have major risk. Given that you've met and know my wife and know quite well that I've totally outkicked my coverage. But on the other hand, what's much more sensible, right, is maybe adopting some tools that can help one's partner supplement their income, right? Taking a second job, right? Maybe going back to night school to add some classes. So the whole idea of a wholesale replacement of the workforce utilizing robotics to control cost is really kind of an unfounded or has no real structural basis in reality today, given that most manufacturers have to react to emerging trends that are here today and not in 20 years from now. All right, this has been phenomenal. Emily, thanks for taking us through another one of these. And I can't wait for the next one.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's always so much fun to discuss these things with you. See you next time.
Yep. All right. See you next time.